I'm Colonel John Gordon, and this is Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Anytime, any day, any week, any season. Training in the 82nd Airborne Division is continuous, hard, and demanding. It has to be, to build strength and stamina. It is training that develops each trooper's confidence in himself and his ability to function with discipline and control in any situation. Teaches him the many military skills that make the airborne trooper a formidable fighting man. It makes him combat ready on the ground and in the air. This endless high-pressure training keeps the 82nd Airborne in top-notch condition for battle. As part of the United States Strike Command, it is prepared to move out swiftly by airdrops or air landing to trouble spots anywhere on Earth. The 82nd is proud to call itself always combat ready.
All the way, sir.
Airborne.
Up, up, up.
All the way. A slogan that expresses the fighting spirit of this great division. But perhaps the slogan that best describes the pride and patriotism of the 82nd is the one given it officially in 1917, because it was composed of fighting men from every state in the Union, all American. The 82nd started as an infantry division in World War I. Sergeant Alvin York was with the All-American Division. Also a major named Jonathan Wainwright, destined for greatness as a general in World War II. At war's end, the All-American Division was demobilized. It came alive again in 1942 when it was reactivated as an infantry division under General Omar Bradley. When General Matthew Ridgway took command later that year, the 82nd became the Army's first airborne division. From the start, airborne training was rugged. They ran and ran some more. They jumped and climbed and crawled. There were calisthenics, rifle range, shoot school, glider loading, practice jumps, crash landings. Training was continuous from Fort Benning, Georgia to the sands of North Africa. The men of the 82nd were learning what it meant to be really combat ready. And ready they were when the first mission was announced in July 1943. Blowing up clouds of desert dust, they took off from North Africa and headed out over the blue ocean. Ahead was their first combat jump. They were to drop into Sicily behind enemy lines, ahead of an Allied invasion that was coming in by sea. The men of the 82nd advanced 150 miles in 6 days. The German and Italian defenders were routed, but not without hard fighting. The Sicilian campaign was the first combat proof that American airborne doctrine was valid. The fighting quality of its paratroopers was made dramatically clear. jump came soon afterward. The Allies had landed at Salerno on the Italian mainland, but the bridgehead was in trouble, so the 82nd went in. The Germans, some of Hitler's best troops, fought savagely with everything they had. It wasn't enough. They were beaten back. On October 1st, 1943, Naples was liberated. Men of the 82nd led the way in, but they had little time for the victory celebration, as elements of the division fought at the Anzio beachhead. They pursued the Germans into the Apennine Mountains. They had to fight mud and exhaustion as well as rocky heights. Spearheading the 5th Army's advance, they finally joined the British 8th Army at Mount Samucro. Then the 82nd was relieved and sent to England. This was their first real breathing spell since Sicily. No one really believed it would last for long, but it was nice while it lasted. Replacements began pouring in, and intensive training was resumed. The biggest jump of all was coming up, into France, to smash the walls of Hitler's fortress Europe. Once again, they were going in ahead of the ground forces. The 82nd Airborne, the new 101st American Airborne, and the British 6th Airborne. The German army was taken by surprise, but not completely. The jump had scattered paratroopers all over Normandy. Fighting became a confused melee of small unit action. The troopers struck out hard and captured Sainte-Mère-Église, the key point in the Nazi defenses and the first town to be liberated in France. It was a slow process. They had to bleed for every town, field, and hedgerow. The 82nd fought for 33 days without relief or reinforcements. The enemy wished they hadn't. Of the 13,000 men who jumped into Normandy, only 5,000 were still on their feet when the 82nd was sent back to England to rest and rebuild the outfit. Almost as bad an ordeal was the Battle of the Bulge, when Hitler's panzer divisions cracked the Allied line in Belgium. The 82nd was called on to hold the northern shoulder of the Bulge. Not only were they outgunned and outnumbered, they were freezing. Like their fellow paratroopers of the 101st at Bastogne, the men of the 82nd threw back one desperate attack after another. Finally, the Nazi drive was played out. Airborne soldiers stayed on the ground now to race across Germany, scooping up a fantastic number of prisoners, including the entire 21st German Army, 145,000 men. It was an inglorious end to Hitler's dream of a 1,000-year Reich. And a triumphant war's end for the 82nd, which was chosen by General Eisenhower to act as American honor guard in Berlin. But best of all was the victory parade down New York's Fifth Avenue, led by General Gavin in January of 1946, when the All-American Division came home to be welcomed by an All-American audience. unlike the aftermath of World War I, there was no deactivation for the 82nd this time. Instead, it was made a regular Army division, and it worked at it, mastering new techniques and equipment. Peacetime training and maneuvers were almost as rugged as World War II. A series of large-scale field exercises made sure that the 82nd lived up to its reputation of always being combat ready. There was some disappointment at not being called on to help in Korea, but that almost totally mountainous country made the use of airborne troops impractical. Always among the first to be trained in new fighting techniques, the division learned how to cope with a nuclear environment using simulated nuclear weapons. These training exercises ranged from coast to coast and as far north as Alaska, where the paratroopers were drilled in cold weather jumping and tactical maneuvers. Then they were exposed to the tropical heat of the Canal Zone and Vieques Island in the Caribbean. For the 82nd, being combat ready meant being fully prepared to fight in any location on Earth. Real combat seemed close in 1962. The All-Americans were set to go all the way during the Cuban Missile Crisis in October. The 82nd stayed on full alert until the threat of war was over. However, another alert 3.5 years later did result in the 82nd being under fire again. Late in April of 1965, the 82nd Airborne, as part of the Army's Strike Command, received emergency orders to deploy into the revolt-torn Dominican Republic. The 82nd led the way as the advance guard of an inter-American peace force fielded by the OAS, the Organization of American States. Anti-communist Dominicans were on hand to greet them with warm support. But the troopers soon learned that not all the local citizens were friendly when they undertook their first mission. This was to secure the east bank of the Azama River and the Duarte Bridge that crossed it. The airborne soldiers promptly came under sniper fire from rebels holding commanding positions on the other bank. It was a baptism of fire for most of the young troopers, but they took it with the cool competence of veterans. They crossed the bridge and penetrated Santo Domingo, where they set up a network of outposts and checkpoints to contain the rebel sector. Nonetheless, rebel fire was heavy throughout May and into June. The airborne soldiers moved swiftly and expertly to knock out snipers. The 82nd was under strict orders not to take the offensive, since negotiations with the rebels were underway.